to introduce our next speaker, Erik Storlie. So Erik Storlie entered graduate school at Berkeley in 1962, intending to become a medievalist. Experience with cannabis, peyote, mushrooms, and LSD prompted an interest in Zen and the synergies between meditation and psychedelic medicine. He began a practice of sitting meditation in 1964 with Shunryu Suzuki, apologies if I say these names incorrectly, in San Francisco, studied with Dainin Katagiri, helping to found the Minnesota Zen Meditation Center, and currently teaches meditation and mindfulness at the University of Minnesota. His doctoral work focused on awakening experiences in Zen and Puritanism, and publications include Nothing on My Mind, Berkeley LSD, 2 Zen Masters, and Go Deep and Take Plenty of Roots. Please join me in welcoming Erik Storlie to the stage.
Notes, most of which would be useless, but that's all right. I think I better turn down my hearing aids. Good. So Dennis and I got our hearing aids in the last few years, and I think it's helped. I think he's listening more now. Well, first, I just want to thank Jessica for the incredible work she's done organizing this remarkable event, these other sold-out events. She has only been in Minnesota about a year, and she's sparked this amazing community. I admire her courage and determination as she pushes to bring psilocybin work to the Department of Psychiatry. This is important and long overdue. Of course, I want to thank Dennis for his lifelong dedication to the sacred plant medicines, especially to ayahuasca, and to his career in biochemistry and ethnopharmacology. I'm not happy that the occasion here is a farewell. I've been hoping that the Canadian authorities would realize that they perhaps don't need to admit Dennis into that nation, but apparently it's going forward. I met Dennis about 18 years ago when we both showed up at the Center for Spirituality and Healing. I was teaching meditation, and he had several courses on drugs and plants, and we kind of connected, and it became clear. I didn't know much about Dennis. I knew about Terrence. And then we realized we had this checkered background career, and then we started talking a lot. And at some point, I said to Dennis, well, you know, a big shift for me was when I went to the 1977 and 78 hallucinogenic mushroom conferences in Port Wharton and San Francisco. And there I was able to get a mushroom culture. And then I found this book called Cultivating Psilocybin Mushrooms by Oss and Erik. And Dennis went like this, and he said, that was me and my brother. So Dennis and I actually connected back in '78 when I decided it was time to grow my own. And I thought at that time that this change in the culture would be the end of the drug war and the end of dealing, because anybody who wanted a psychedelic with a little hardware and drugstore equipment could grow their own. But I was profoundly wrong. But this is a new renaissance. This is a new change. And at the time, in '77 and '78, I was able to meet some of the luminaries, Gordon Wasson, Richard Evans Schultes, Albert Hoffman. It felt so good as a middle-aged man then, who had had to be underground for so many years, to meet these elders whose lives had been, in many ways, turned upside down, and who had devoted careers then to working with psychedelics. And it looked like a renaissance at that time, and then the drug war came on in spades, and everything seemed to stop, at least stop in any public way. So I came into this back in 1964, and a few remarks about that. I'm struck that Dennis is almost exactly 10 years younger than I. He was born on December 17th, 1950. I was born on November 30th, 1940. So when I first encountered the LSD molecule in the spring of 1964, Dennis was only 13. I hope still an innocent child. Jessica, however, was not yet on the planet. So she can bring this work forward into many, many future decades. So when you look at me, you look at over 50 years of psychedelic history, at someone whose life was profoundly and permanently changed. Tragically, during most of those years, work had to stop. All legal work and research had to stop. So let me tell you how this happened to me in 1964. I'll just read a few pages from my book. And of course, Dennis and I have brought some wonderful books here. And any proceeds from my book I'll give to this fund, I hope in cash, so it can be increased. So the background in this story is I was living in Berkeley. I was in graduate school, a medievalist, in love with Middle English, but depressed, often in black moods, often stuck, often procrastinating, and at the same time engaging with many of the drugs that were available, most of them not at all helpful. So I and my friends were messing with everything from methadone to dexedrine to heroin to grass to hash, anything we could lay our hands on. So when one day my African-American girlfriend and I, we lived together in Berkeley, had friends who said, well, we can give you this new stuff called LSD. So we said, of course, why not? We'd try anything. What could possibly go wrong? So Celeste and I, and a friend called Right Hand, because his left arm was shriveled, got a vial of blue liquid, and we divided it into 3 glasses and drank it off. And suddenly we felt very cramped in our apartment. So Celeste and Lefty and I climbed in my old Studebaker station wagon. We thought, we've got to get out of here. We've got to get up to Tilden Park, which is this beautiful grove, extensive grove of trees and parkland up above the hills of Berkeley. I began to drive uphill at each intersection, and soon we're climbing out of the Berkeley flats into the hills, our heads bobbing like balloons on wiggly stalks as we zoom around twisting curves and up steep roller coaster streets. Soon we're in Tilden Park, the hills falling off into the bay behind us. Driving by a grove of eucalyptus, Celeste shouts enthusiastically, "Oh man, men, look at that huge tree. I'm in love, Eric. Stop, I've got to go see it." I stop and we slowly, carefully climb out and step into the grove. Inhaling pungent smells of leaf-scattered earth, deep into our lungs we pace reverently to the great tree. Gently, Celeste and I place both hands on the smooth, scaling bark. Right hand strokes it with his good right hand. Smiling, eyes alight, we hold our tree and then sit down in the leaves at its base. I lie at full length on my back and entranced stare up at the leaf canopy above us. A living cathedral bower swaying in the breezes. Celeste stands over me, then straddles me, one foot on each side, and slowly bends her knees to sit comfortably on my stomach. "Erik, look at you," she says, smiling, reverent, staring down into my face. "You're a god." That didn't last. I smiled back, admiring her, loving her black eyes, the glowing nut brown of her face, her glossy hair, intricate in black curls and kinks, each harboring a flash of diamond. "Oh," I murmur, your hair, your hair." "What? What about it?" she breaks in, face suddenly clouding. She was always bothered by her kinky hair. Said, "Nothing," I say, "nothing at all. It's just beautiful." Suddenly, right hand groans, his voice a strained whisper. "Oh, fuck no, man, no, no, no." He's staring at a squad car that's just pulled up behind the Studebaker. An officer, blue uniformed, opens the passenger door and climbs out. We struggle up to our feet. Celeste smiles broadly toward the squad. Right hand grabs my left arm with his right hand, hissing, "You left the goddamn car in the middle of the parkway." Busted for sure. And it's true, we just stopped the car. We didn't think about parking. Heart pounding, I look at right hand and Celeste and whisper, "Be cool, be cool, be cool. For God's sake, we can handle this. We're not holding, just look normal as hell." For an instant, Celeste's beaming face freezes into a scowl. Then a series of snorts burst through her nostrils, turning into irrepressible giggles. Celeste, be cool," I whisper urgently. "Be cool. You guys just stay up here and I'll go down there." So skipping over, I went down, and suddenly I became very calm. It was very strange. And I remember as I reached my license to the officer, I could see a tiny tremble in my hand, but I knew no one who was not stoned would ever notice. And we went through the deal. I said, "Had a good patter. I teach at St. Mary's College. My friend right hand has just been in Vietnam," which was not true, and he has lost his arm. "And we're just showing my girlfriend Tilden Park. She's new to the area." And with disgust, she just waved us on. Now that wouldn't have happened a few years later. This was early on, and there wasn't the same kind of heavy concern and attention about hippies. So let me skip through and just to a point where in the evening then we take right hand home. He's very paranoid. And we just go to Telegraph Avenue and we want to see the scene. We go in the late afternoon. And the street crowds with men and women, mostly young, in wild natural hair and extravagant costumes. An old gaily painted van disgorges hippies in from some country retreat. On the way to the Cafe Mediterranean for a cold drink, passing the laundromat, Celeste looks in the picture window and sees a young, lanky black guy, high school age, sitting on the floor against washing machines, absorbed in playing a 12-string guitar. "Let's go hear him," she says. "Groovy," I say. We walk in through the open door. The air is suddenly hot, the room filled with sounds of washers churning and buttons and zippers ticking on the revolving drums of dryers. We sit down on the concrete, cool air flows in, and the guitarist doesn't look up. He pretends not to notice his audience, but we feel his excitement. His playing falters for a few seconds, becoming precise and self-conscious. Celeste turns to me, whispering, "Oh, look how dark his skin is, how glossy. My is so beautiful." And then we decide to leave the street and just go up into the residential areas in Berkeley. And this is where a time that I think of as really the change point in my life. We start walking up the hills, block after block, following our feet. As we get further up, streets steepen. We stop again and again, turning to view the city. The golden sun drops into the bay. Hand in hand, we walk slowly, lingering to admire houses whose window eyes smile back at us. Colors inside glow, backlit like stained glass. We feel reverence as if pacing through a church. Every few minutes we come to a standstill, eyes roving over fences, into front yards and side yards, feasting on strange tropical trees entranced by colors, glowing through intricate webs of grasses, flowers, and shrubs. I'm elated, exhilarated, blown free of despair. What's been wrong with me? All I ever wanted was this undeniable, unutterable beauty. Beauty in the tiny, intricate patterns of pebbles and sand crystallized in the concrete beneath our feet. Beauty beckoning with the fingers of leaves on shrubs standing in ordinary Berkeley front yards. Beauty in modest flowers standing up in side yards, speaking soundless, gentle hellos. So within about 6 months, my life, the life of a couple of my friends, completely turned over because of this experience. A sense that all of the drug abuse, all of the kind of hippie, black despair, black turtlenecks, existential angst, why was I there if this was available? If this was available somehow. So that summer I went with a couple of friends to do a velada with Maria Sabina in Outlet Jimenez, a beautiful experience. Came back to Berkeley. Celeste and I got a house in Oakland. And then suddenly Sandoz LSD was available. It was still legal. I didn't even know it was legal. I assumed it was illegal. But we started just playing with it. No setting, no common sense. And I'd invited another buddy, a black friend from Minnesota, to room with us. And I urged him to drop with me one afternoon. And the next thing I knew, we were almost in a fist fight. He pushed me down, fled out the door. What had happened? What had happened? And later that night, I hear a knock, and he comes back in, and I say, my God, I don't know what happened. We've got to figure out how to work with this or what to do with this. We don't know what we're doing. And at that point, another friend got Leary's book, The Psychedelic Experience, which established setting, gave some parameters, and then recommended a weekly high-dose LSD trip. And soon, all of us would reach perfect, supreme enlightenment. Well, all I can tell you is I'm still here practicing meditation, but that became very powerful. For about 2 years, we pursued that path. We did pretty much weekly trips, and we got involved with the San Francisco Zen Center, Suzuki Roshi, and did extensive retreats, became hard meditation practicers. And this was very much the mood about psychedelics at that point in time. People had read Aldous Huxley's book, The Doors of Perception, where he said, and I'll kind of paraphrase, he said, as a student of religion, I always thought that only saints and sages would ever be allowed to have an actual experience of oneness or the sacred. But then he took mescaline, and after that experience said, I now have had that experience. I've had that experience. The same thing with Houston Smith. a student of or a professor of religion at MIT. He went to he participated in the Harvard Divinity School experiment where a bunch of divinity students were given psilocybin. And he said, I've never again had an experience of such closeness to a personal God. So the mood we were in was spiritual. These are substances that open up the sacred, open up the divine. And as I looked at that initial experience I had, the, you might say, therapeutic part of it, for me, was seeing the incredible beauty out there that I had been shut off from in my rather youthful arrogance, depression, and often self-indulgence and confusion. And, you know, we're all there at times, and certainly in our 20s we can be there a lot. But I was at a point where I could easily just have gone down and got more and more involved with unhelpful drug experience, just kind of as bravado. We're all showing how much we can do. And instead, this moved us back to, wait a minute, this has to have a serious purpose. This has to be life-saving. And ultimately, ideally, it's a way to touch the divine. It's a way to have an experience of oneness with the cosmos, however, whatever language you can put on that. The next step for me, after about our year or so of doing the heavy, leery, psychedelic, Zen, psychonaut, Zen master trip, was to take a couple of high-dose trips that completely destroyed me. Ironically, one of them in the presence of Leary at a workshop. And after those two experiences, I thought, I can't do it again. I just can't do it again. I'm terrified. I had that feeling that some of you have had, that this will never end, that I will be hospitalized, that I am a goner, that I have screwed up badly. It's the same experience Albert Hoffman reports when he took the 250 micrograms, thinking it could not possibly have much of an impact. And he writes of that experience saying, it flashed through my mind, I, an impeccable chemist, a Swiss, I've done this to my family, I've done this to my career. This will never end. But then, wonderfully, at the end of that experience, when the doctor told him, you're okay, when things settled, he went out into the garden and had one of those opening, connecting experiences. So, what we're doing here is finding a way to make these kinds of healing experiences, psychologically and emotional healing experiences available, and also making available the sacred, the divine, the sense of total connectedness and belonging that we deserve as human beings on this green earth. That should not be unavailable. Most people are not going to go to a 7-day Zen retreat in silence from 5 till 9 at night. Although if you do it, you can have a very powerful opening experience. But that's difficult. That's difficult. And there's not a lot of time. So at the same time, with proper set and setting, people can have that kind of realization through something like psilocybin or LSD, but it's got to be beautifully and carefully structured, of course. so that people are safe, so that something good happens. And when the bad things happen, as they happen to me certainly on a number of occasions, I'm still safe. I can have my suffering. I can have my dark night of the soul. And I think I could guarantee that anybody who does any significant number of psychedelic experiences will have their time, dark night of the soul. After those 2 difficult trips, I quit for 10 years. I quit for 10 years. Got totally involved with Zen, founding the Zen Meditation Center, working on my doctorate, teaching full-time, etc., etc. And then an old friend said, well, they're having a hallucinogenic mushroom conference. We should go. I thought, yeah, I'm curious about this now. What in the hell was that flipped me out of a life as a medievalist? It could have been a good life, perhaps. Although someone said to me, well, you just would have become an alcoholic professor like your mentors, and that was true. All my mentors at that time were alcoholics in English and humanities departments. So we went. I brought home a culture that Jeremy Bigwood gave me. I started growing it. And then my friend Richard, who was here, and I had coffee one morning, and my first wife revealed to him I was growing mushrooms. Well, we hadn't really talked about this stuff, but then it turned out he had come to Zen, as I had, through the LSD path, Stephen Gaskin's organization, the farm, etc. So then we decided it's time to go into the mountains and regularly revisit this. And a third friend joined us, another Zen student who'd come through the route of LSD, and we became the Church of Three. So every summer we'd head into the mountains of Idaho and revisit the sacred. So how does this relate to meditation? Well, first of all, it's a great encouragement, because you can start a meditation practice and it's dry and dusty and boring and you just want to look at your cell phone. Whereas if you have had this experience, you know that beneath that busy mind is something huge. There is something huge there. It's available. So that's a great encouragement as a meditator to occasionally ally with these plant medicines. Say, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. Also, as a person interested in psychedelics, it's very helpful to have what I call a foundational meditation practice, so that you don't go for a few weeks or months or a year living your usual frantic life, and then you drop this big molecule and you're rattled. Not that I wouldn't be rattled anyway, but I'm less rattled when I have an ongoing practice where every day or most every day I can find the breath, I can ground myself, I can work on calming down what's come to be called the default mode network. That part of the brain that's always ruminating, going on to the past, to the future, worrying, hoping, etc. That part of the brain that is a good friend, it gets us through a lot. It's the ego, essentially. But it's very difficult to spend your whole life trapped in that ego. So a daily, weekly, regular practice is something that's well worth cultivating. I recommend it. So I've been doing it for over 50 years, and it's been of tremendous help. And I'm treating it now like a means to an end, which is not. Because just as a psychedelic experience, when it's at that height of beauty and wonder, needs nothing else. You're not waiting for it for the next thing to happen. It's enough. It's enough. This was the experience of the saints, the sages, the Buddhas, whatever. This life is enough. It's just enough to be here. What a gift. So we can also cultivate that in just the simple act of practicing meditation. We really can. So I think of these as allies. There's an alliance here that's possible. And every day you can step away from the default mode network. Even for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. And I was going to have us all do it, but Jessica's got the hook. So it's my time. But thank you very much. It's great to see you.
Everyone join me in wishing Eric a happy birthday.